Hello and welcome to Mad About Superheroes Cartoon Showcase. Thanks for joining me in my quest to bring meaning back to Saturday mornings. On this nostalgic episode, we're going to revisit one of the most beloved cartoons of not just the 90s, but of all time, Batman the Animated Series. More specifically, the revered episode Heart of Ice, written by Paul Dini, who previously wrote episodes for He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Transformers, and G.I. Joe, among many others. Props to Dini for writing one of my absolute favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series, and I'm sure I'm not alone in my adoration for Heart of Ice, the awesome debut episode of Mr. Freeze. The success of the episode is largely due to the fact that Mr. Freeze is reimagined from a mad scientist type from the Batman comics into a more relatable, much more tragic figure in the animated series, as we get a hint of during the opening of the episode aptly titled Heart of Ice.
This is how I'll always remember you, surrounded by winter, forever young, forever beautiful. Rest well, my love. The monster who took you from me will soon learn that revenge is a dish best served cold.
Around this time, during the early 90s, I was heavily into collecting comics, and had many issues of Batman, but I don't think I had any featuring Mr. Freeze. My earliest memories of Mr. Freeze were from the Batman 1966 TV series that were in reruns. I believe there were two different actors to portray Mr. Freeze on the series, but the actor that made an impression was Otto Preminger. His portrayal of Mr. Freeze really stuck with me as a kid, and made me a fan of the character. I was always a bit disappointed that Mr. Freeze never showed up on any of the incarnations of the long-running Super Friends cartoon series throughout the 70s and 80s. Mr. Freeze's first appearance on Batman the Animated Series was even more impressive, and furthered my enthusiasm for the character. Originally, Mr. Freeze was named Mr. Zero when he first appeared in Batman comics in the late 1950s. He had a lame yellow and purple costume in his comic debut, but even back then, he had the glass helmet, a look he maintained throughout his villainous career. The name change to Mr. Freeze was actually contributed to the character by the Batman 66 TV series, and it carried over into the DC Comics. Mr. Freeze is a cooler name than Mr. Zero anyway. The basic premise of Heart of Ice is that Victor Freeze has been attacking several divisions of GothCorp, stealing pieces of tech for a secret weapon he intends to build. Batman's first attempt to stop him doesn't go as intended, during which Mr. Freeze leaves one of his own henchmen behind after he accidentally freezes his legs.
Leave him. He should have been more careful. Now he's paid the price for his incompetence.
But he's one of us.
Then perhaps you'd like to share his fate.
His ruthlessness is in stark contrast to the compassion of Batman, who rescues the frozen henchman.
With all the compartments on your belt, you'd think there'd be one for tissues.
Bruce Wayne then visits GothCorp CEO Ferris Boyle to see what he can find out. He discovers that the start of Freeze's vendetta against GothCorp was a bitter falling out between Freeze and Boyle, during which Boyle almost killed Freeze and presumably killed his terminally ill wife, Nora.
Nora! Nora!
Now Batman must find a way to bring Boyle to justice before Freeze carries out his revenge. This revamp of Freeze's origin really popularized the character and made him a much more prominent villain utilized in Batman's Rogues Gallery, going forward in both the cartoon and comics. The then new origin for Mr. Freeze, created by Paul Dini, became canon, and it was also incorporated into the live-action film series of the era, in Batman and Robin. Not a very good comic book movie to say the least, but the Mr. Freeze origin in the film was one of the few highlights. Had they had gone with a film more in line with the tone of the 1989 film, Most fans, including myself, would have rather seen Patrick Stewart as Mr. Freeze rather than Arnold Schwarzenegger. During another encounter with Mr. Freeze, the Cape Crusader gets captured, and during a bit of dialogue, it's revealed that Freeze wears his special suit because he can no longer survive outside a Sub-Zero environment. And during a common trope of the genre, the villain leaves the hero trapped and unattended just so he can escape. Mr. Freeze's diabolical plan is coming to fruition. He's assembled his giant freeze gun and intends to use it on Gotham, and Batman intends to stop him.
Thank you. You beg? In my nightmares, I see my Nora behind the glass, begging to me with frozen eyes. How I've longed to see that look frozen on you.
Not only is the Dark Knight fighting Mr. Freeze and his minions, he's also fighting a bad cold. But not to worry, he's armed with Alfred's chicken soup.
Ooh, what was that stuff?
The only way to fight a cold.
Can't end this way. Vengeance.
Bruce Wayne and his superhero alter ego is voiced by the late great Kevin Conroy, who does an excellent job with the duality of the character. There's a distinct difference between how he voices Bruce Wayne and when he slips into his Dark Knight persona. I also really enjoy the cold tone of Freeze's voice and the electronic sound they gave it. Freeze is expertly voiced by Michael Ansara, who played the Klingon commander Kang on Star Trek: The Original 60s series. Batman the Animated Series also adapts Danny Elfman's themes from the Batman '89 film. A new theme for Mr. Freeze is also incorporated into the episode. The characterization of Mr. Freeze in Batman the Animated Series was so successful that he became a recurring villain on the series, and a straight-to-home video movie was produced, Batman Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. DC produced a comic series based in the Batman the Animated Series continuity called Batman Adventures that I collected upon their release, and among tons of other merchandise, a line of toys were also released from Kenner that were cartoon accurate, and of course, I had to have a Mr. Freeze figure. Batman the Animated Series was highly influenced by the first two Batman films directed by Tim Burton, specifically the darker tone and gothic aesthetic, which were Bruce Timm's and Eric Radomski's inspiration when designing the series, as well as the Max Fleischer 1940s theatrical cartoons. Batman the Animated Series was hailed as a groundbreaking superhero show, receiving praise for its writing, thematic complexity, artistic presentation, voice acting, orchestrated soundtrack, and modernization of its title character source material. The series also won multiple Daytime Emmy Awards. Batman the Animated Series became the first in the continuity of a shared DC animated universe.
The monster who took you from me will soon learn that revenge is a dish best served cold.
At the start of Heart of Ice, Mr. Freeze is shown to be vindictive, but midway through the episode, we start to understand his motivation for revenge, and by the end of the story, he's more of an empathetic character. At its core, Heart of Ice is a tragic love story. The motivation for Mr. Freeze's revenge is understandable, but is it justifiable? I hope you've enjoyed this cartoon showcase. And as always, thanks for letting your geek flag fly with Mad About Superheroes.